Hello viewers, thank you for joining me for another anime review. In general, but especially now that I've started making reviews, I try to keep a sort of balance to my anime life. I don't mean that I go looking for shows I suspect I won't like, but I do make an effort to dabble a little in each genre, making sure I don't watch essentially the same show over and over again. And I say this now, because I wasn't overly excited to start this one. In the past, I've found the slice-of-life genre to be a little dull, but I decided to give this one a try. One of many shows I've taken on, if only to maintain that balance. And in some ways it was exactly what I thought it would be, but in others I was pleasantly surprised. There were 26 episodes in all, and technically 2 seasons, but as the gap between episode 13 and 14 was basically non-existent, I'll be reviewing them as one here. Kimi To Boku follows a group of boys through their high school years. Yuki, Yuta, Kaname, and Shun have all been friends ever since they were little kids. They are soon joined by Chizuru, a foreign transfer student, and each episode is an account of their day-to-day lives. There's also a fairly large cast of side characters, some more likable than others. There isn't much more to mention plot-wise. It's your typical slice of life. Because there is little to no story to speak of, discussion of the characters will come later in this review. Let's get some of the negative points out of the way first. Where this show really falls short is the animation. Kimi To Boku has the sort of problems that make me suspect they were lacking in budget. There is a ton of dialogue in this show, and the speaker is often off-screen. The character designs were kind of bland and unoriginal. Change Kaname's coloring and the twins might as well be triplets. The first opening stands out because it showcases a bunch of scene transitions that are lacking throughout the rest of the show. The music didn't really stand out to me, but it's more accurate to say that I'm apathetic rather than displeased. Any preferences I have towards the endings and openings have more to do with what's happening on screen than the music itself. There is no English dub. The Japanese sounded fine to me, and as for the voicing, well, the characters sound the way you'd expect them to, which is my cue to move on to the characters themselves. The characters are both a high and low point for me. On one hand, it should be apparent from episode 1 that the characters are nothing new. The basis for this group was a bunch of archetypes. You've got Kaname, the uptight, scholarly one with the glasses, Yuki and Yuta, the twins, Shun, the overly polite, super effeminate one, and they are joined by Chizuru, the loud, obnoxious transfer student who manages to infiltrate this group of childhood friends and never misses an opportunity to stick his foot in his mouth. For comedic purposes, of course. Sometimes these characters came across as a little dry and predictable, largely because we've all seen them before. We all know Kaname's going to overreact to his friend's childish antics. Shun can only be mistaken for a girl so many times before it stops being funny. But at the same time, when the writers weren't relying on stereotypes, these characters could really shine. Even if the characters themselves weren't anything original, I often found myself really liking the way they were portrayed. The lifelong friends aspect of this group, for example, was done very subtly. There were a lot of flashbacks of the boys in their kindergarten days, but their casual interactions weren't loud or forced. Little things like how well they knew each other's personality quirks and how comfortable they were in each other's homes went a long way. It was just as effective and didn't feel like, "Hey, did we mention we've all been best friends since forever?" was constantly being shoved in my face. Take note, everybody. This may be the only time I ever say such a thing. I genuinely liked the love triangle in this show. Not so much for the storyline. I mentioned that this show isn't exactly plot-driven, but the episodes showcasing the love triangle were the only time I felt we were really getting any character development. They showed a softer, quieter side to Chizuru. Without it, he may have been the only one in the group I genuinely disliked. Chizuru is definitely the character that stands out the most. I was actually kind of disappointed that his late inclusion into the group didn't cause them to look deeper into their friendship or anything. Their lives just went on like he'd always been with them. But though he was typically kind of annoying, I don't think I would have made it through to the end without him. Chizuru brings an energetic feel to all of the scenes he's in. I thought this was slow with his character. I can't imagine it without him. Honestly, though, I think my favorite aspect of Kimi To Boku was the portrayal of Yuki and Yuta. In a lot of shows with identical twins, futakoi, the two characters might as well be the same person, because no one can tell them apart anyway. There are other shows, most notably Ouran High School Host Club, where being identical and the effect that has on them as individuals is actually the thing that leads to character development. Don't get me wrong, I love delving into the Hitachin twins' identity crisis, but I almost feel like that's the obvious way to go about it. Kimi To Boku had a much more refreshing approach. They make it just about impossible to mix the two up. There are the little visual cues. They have slightly different hairstyles and different color palettes. Yuta is always wearing blue and Yuki's usually in red or brown. But more importantly, their individual personalities were pretty clear from the beginning. The very first episode singles out Yuki as they try to find a club to match his hobbies and interests. Furthermore, it's not uncommon to see one of them without the other. They're not even in the same class. I think it says it all how genuinely surprised they are on the rare occasions that someone does mix them up. So kudos to the writers for doing something different, even if the rest of the show is a bunch of stereotypes. So all in all, I enjoyed this well enough the first time, but I can't say I see myself going back to ever rewatch it. It could be really sweet from time to time, and it had this dry sense of humor that had me laughing at something every episode. So if you're a slice of life fan, then I definitely recommend this one. But if you're like me and you prefer something a little faster, with more magic, well, I wouldn't blame you for deciding Kimi To Boku isn't for you long before you reach episode 26. So now would be as good a time as any to correct a past blunder. In my review for Noragami, I said there was no English dub, only to find the trailer for the dub shortly after. Goes to show the value of research. What can I say? I'd assumed Netflix would have been streaming the dub if it existed. Now, I have this thing about picking one language to watch an anime in and sticking with it, so I won't be watching the dub, but this is relevant because it means Funimation has licensed the show. The second season of Noragami is well underway, and Funimation is currently streaming all the episodes that have already aired on their website. I know what I'm watching next. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching this review, and I hope you'll join me for my next one.